Beneath the continents, beyond the reach of drills and light, lies a world that ancient maps, monks, and explorers all described, but science has quietly avoided. From the frozen gates of Antarctica to the whispering caverns beneath the Himalayas, evidence suggests that the Earth may not be as silent as it seems. Old seismographs record rhythmic pulses with no known cause. Myths from Sumer, Tibet, and the Andes all speak of a hidden kingdom, a vast civilization that withdrew underground after the Great Cataclysm 12,000 years ago. Their machines may still hum, their archives still whisper through stone. Tonight, we descend into the quiet heart of the planet to follow the signals, the legends, and the history buried beneath our feet. Join us as we explore what might remain of humanity's first and greatest empire, the one that never truly vanished, the forgotten throne beneath our feet. In 1834, miners near the city of Khabarovsk in eastern Russia broke through a layer of limestone and found a tunnel that did not appear natural. The walls were smooth, as if carved by tools that left no mark of chisel or hammer. A faint current of air moved through the passage, carrying a dry warmth that made no sense so deep below the frozen soil. When word reached St. Petersburg, geologists from the Imperial Academy dismissed the claim as an illusion caused by candlelight. But one of the miners, a man named Ivan Borsk, described a large chamber beyond the tunnel, a place where metal pillars supported a dome of black stone. He said it looked older than any church, older than any ruin he had ever seen. Over the decades that followed, other reports emerged. In 1871, French explorers mapping caverns near the Pyrenees claimed to have found engraved tablets showing cities connected by underground corridors. The markings were not Latin, Greek, or Egyptian. Linguist Charles-Étienne Delonge suggested they were remnants of a civilization that had retreated into the crust during an age of planetary chaos. His words were ignored by the academic circles of Paris, but the drawings he left behind, spirals, towers, and circles nested beneath mountains, would reappear in occult literature decades later. In 1906, an expedition led by the Swedish explorer Sven Hedin in Tibet documented local legends of a hidden realm called Agati. Monks of the Gelug school spoke of it as a vast kingdom beneath the surface, ruled by a lineage that had never died. According to the texts Hedin collected, this realm was not a myth, but a refuge built after a global disaster that turned oceans to ice and lands to desert. The monks called its ruler the King of the World, a figure said to appear only when surface civilizations were near collapse. When the 20th century began to record the first underground photographs, strange coincidences surfaced. In 1937, an American geologist named Richard Shaver sent letters to Amazing Stories magazine, claiming that while working with industrial welding equipment, he began to hear voices. They spoke of an ancient empire deep inside the earth, whose machines still ran after tens of thousands of years. He described them as the remnants of the elder race humans who had fled the sun when it became hostile. Shaver's claims were published as fiction, yet he insisted they were true. Readers wrote back describing similar dreams of vast subterranean cities glowing with artificial light, silent railways running through tunnels of obsidian, and air that shimmered like heat, though no fire burned. Scientists, faced with these accounts, remained silent or skeptical. But not everyone dismissed them. In 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the American polar explorer, recorded in his flight log an entry during Operation High Jump. It spoke of flying over green lands beyond the ice, and of machines that could rise vertically from the snow, faster than any aircraft. The official report made no mention of it. Byrd died 10 years later, and his diaries were locked away in naval archives. Yet copies, handwritten and unsigned, began to circulate through secret societies that saw in them proof that something ancient was still alive beneath the poles. By the mid-20th century, rumors connected all these fragments, the Russian tunnels, the Tibetan legends, the Shaver voices, and birds' flight, into a single idea: that humanity's first and greatest empire did not vanish. It retreated. Some called it Lemuria, others the Atlantean Continuum or the Agartic Network. In 1959, the Soviet geophysicist Yakov Gakkel proposed that the crust beneath Central Asia contained massive hollow cavities formed not by nature but by directed geological action. He did not elaborate. His notes were found years later, describing magnetic readings that pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. There were attempts to locate entrances. In 1962, the Polish researcher Ferdynand Ossendowski organized a private expedition into Mongolia's Gobi Desert. His goal was to find the rumored northern gate of Shambhala, said to lead downward into the earth. He never returned. Only fragments of his notebook were recovered by herders, sketches of hexagonal halls, references to perpetual lamps, and a line written in French, "They do not wish to be found." In the 1,970 seconds, American geologist David Pratt collected seismic data from unexplained echoes beneath the Himalayas. At certain depths, sound waves behaved as if reflecting off hollow chambers rather than solid rock. When he presented his findings in 1978 at a geological symposium in Geneva, his paper was quietly removed from the official proceedings. Pratt later said, "I don't think it was the data they feared, it was the question of who might be listening from below." Across continents, ancient records mention visitors from beneath rather than above. The Hopi people of North America spoke of their ancestors emerging from Sipapu, holes in the earth that led from a hidden world after a great flood. The Sumerians wrote of the Abzu, a domain of fresh waters beneath the ground, ruled by the god Enki, bringer of wisdom and craft. In India's oldest Puranas, Nagas the serpent people were said to live in jeweled cities beneath rivers and mountains, descending from the time when the surface was scorched by celestial fire. When modern engineers drilled deep boreholes such as the Kola Superdeep project in Russia, they found temperatures rising beyond prediction and metallic sounds that instruments could not explain. Some recordings from 1989 captured low, mechanical tones echoing up the shaft. Officially, these were seismic feedback noises. Yet one technician, Yuri Andropov, not the later Soviet leader, wrote in a private memo that it sounded like engines idling far below. His note was never acknowledged. By the 1,990 seconds, satellite mapping began to reveal anomalies: geometric voids beneath the Tibetan plateau, grid-like magnetic patterns under Antarctica, and symmetrical cavities beneath the Amazon basin. None were large enough to confirm vast cities, but each hinted at the possibility of engineered spaces deep within the crust. In 1997, NASA's radar imaging accidentally recorded a faint electromagnetic pulse from beneath the transantarctic mountains. It repeated every 12 hours. Some dismissed it as instrument interference. Others, privately, called it a signal. Legends say the empire below has watched humanity rise and fall many times. It observes, records, and waits. Theorists suggest that its technology might harness geothermal currents and the planet's magnetic field, granting energy without sun or wind. In old Sanskrit texts, there are references to vimanas of the inner sky, vehicles that move in silence through rock as if through air. A 12th century Tibetan chronicle even names a route from the surface monastery of Tsaparang to a lower city called Parmaloka, the hidden land of peace. Few modern explorers dare to test these claims. The entrances described in older maps have been sealed by landslides, floods, or governments, declaring the areas restricted. But traces remain in folklore echoes of a time when the earth itself was not seen as a prison of rock, but a layered world with kingdoms, stacked like forgotten pages. Beneath the crust, beneath the molten veins, perhaps rests the memory of our own beginnings, the maps that shouldn't exist. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis completed a map unlike any other of his time. Drawn on gazelle skin and signed with his own hand, it showed the western coasts of Europe and Africa, the eastern edges of the Americas, and at the very bottom an outline that appeared to be Antarctica. The strange part was not the inclusion of this southern landmass, but the detail with which it was rendered. Mountains, river deltas, and bays were drawn with precision that cartography would not achieve again for centuries. Yet Antarctica, as far as official records show, would not be discovered until 1820, when Fabian von Bellingshausen and Mikhail Lazarev of the Russian Navy sighted the Fimbul ice shelf. Scholars have long debated what Piri Reis could have used as his source. The admiral himself noted in the margin that his chart was a composite, copied from maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great and from charts of the early kings of the sea. These sources, he said, were ancient. Some researchers, like Professor Arlington Mallory in the 1950 seconds, argued that the Antarctic coastline shown on the map was not covered in ice at all, suggesting that the originals had been drawn when the continent's edges were still free of glaciers. Geological records indicate that such a condition may have existed more than 6,000 years ago. When Mallory presented his findings to the U.S. Hydrographic Office, a cartographer named Harold Z. Ohlmeyer wrote a short but unsettling letter. "It is beyond our comprehension how the data on this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographic knowledge in 1513. The letter was filed away, but copies circulated among private researchers who saw it as proof that fragments of an older civilization's knowledge had survived into the Renaissance. The Piri Reis map was not alone. In 1737, French geographer Philippe Boische presented to the Academy of Sciences in Paris a map of the Antarctic continent again, beneath its ice. Boische's version even divided the land into two separate masses with a water channel between them. In 1958, seismic surveys revealed that Antarctica indeed consists of two main landmasses, separated by a chain of subglacial mountains. How Boische could have known this, using only 18th century tools, remains unanswered. He claimed his data came from ancient authorities, preserved in the French archives of exploration. Even earlier examples suggest that map-making once carried information far older than the cultures credited with it. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531, found centuries later in the Library of Congress, portrays Antarctica's rivers and valleys in remarkable proportion. The precise latitudes and longitudes align with modern readings within a few degrees. The implication is that someone, long before recorded history, had charted the southern pole from above, an impossible task for any known civilization before the invention of aircraft or satellites. Historians often explain these maps as imaginative composites or lucky guesses, but when similar anomalies appear across multiple continents and centuries, coincidence begins to lose its footing. In China's imperial archives, maps from the Yuan dynasty reference inner lands beneath the world's edge, marked with circular borders and notations describing warm winds and the absence of stars. A 14th century Persian chart discovered in Tabriz depicts a vast subterranean sea labeled Bahr al-Zulumat, the Sea of Darkness. The shapes drawn along its rim resemble coastlines, not random decoration. Some researchers have proposed that these maps were not of the surface at all, but of the interior echoes of a forgotten cartography that mapped the earth from within. In the late 1800s, a German archivist named Karl Unger claimed to have found a parchment in the Vatican Library referencing a nether continent accessible through polar mouths. The document was never seen again, and Unger's account survives only through his correspondence with the scholar Hermann Wolther, who published an essay titled Die Erde von innen, The Earth from Within, in 1901. He wrote, "The oldest maps are not of the heavens, but of the hollow of the earth, for it was there the first kingdoms stood." Modern cartographic analysis adds quiet weight to such theories. When digital overlays of the Piri Reis and Buache maps are adjusted for polar shifts, their features align more closely with seismic topography than with the surface view known in the 16th century. Valleys once thought to be errors now correspond to subglacial rifts beneath Queen Maud Land. A 2002 study by cartographer Patrick Hoy noted that if the Piri Reis coastlines were transposed along a rotated globe, they would mirror features currently lying 2 kilometers below ice. Throughout the 20th century, secretive studies continued under military and academic programs. The US Air Force, through its Operation Deep Freeze missions from 1955 onward, conducted radar sweeps of Antarctica's interior. Unpublished data, later leaked by technicians, showed symmetrical patterns in the radar echoes, as though structures lay beneath the ice. Official statements called them natural formations of unknown origin. A handful of independent scientists argued that they resembled the outlines of geometric foundations, possibly remnants of pre-glacial settlements. Elsewhere, South American records contribute another piece. Jesuit missionaries in the 1600s brought back sketches from Andean natives depicting stairways descending into the mountains near Cusco, connecting lands that are lit from below. When overlaid with 20th century geological scans, these drawings align with cave systems extending toward the Nazca Plateau. Satellite imagery from 2017 detected unusual rectangular voids beneath that area, consistent, according to some analysts, with artificial excavation. If such knowledge truly survived into early modern Europe, it raises a question: who preserved it? The Library of Alexandria is often invoked as the great lost storehouse of ancient wisdom, but fragments may have been copied and dispersed through navigators' guilds, royal cartographers, and secret orders that guarded pre-deluge data. The Knights Templar, for instance, were known to have maps not just of ports, but of hidden lands beyond the south. When their archives were seized in 1307, those maps disappeared. Some say the same documents reappeared centuries later in Venice, among the materials used by Piri Reis. In the early 21st century, renewed interest in magnetic mapping revealed more anomalies. Between 2009 and 2013, the European Space Agency's swarm satellites recorded localized magnetic disturbances beneath Antarctica's Wilkes Land crater. The patterns formed concentric circles more than 250 kilometers wide. NASA geophysicist Ralph von Freys noted that such readings could indicate dense metallic structures buried beneath the crust, perhaps a massive impact site or something engineered. The data remain unexplained, yet when placed alongside those ancient maps, the coincidence seems less random. There is no proof that the maps were drawn from direct exploration beneath the surface, but their accuracy continues to challenge the timeline of human discovery. They show us coastlines and landforms visible only from a height, or perhaps from within. They suggest that humanity once possessed knowledge of the earth that has since been forgotten, sealed under centuries of silt and secrecy. Each surviving chart is not merely a tool of navigation, but a fragment of memory traced, copied, and passed down by hands that may have remembered a world we no longer see. The Gates Beneath the Ice. In December 1946, Admiral Richard E. Byrd led Operation High Jump, a massive US Navy expedition to Antarctica. Officially, it was a scientific mission meant to test equipment and establish research bases. Yet the scale of the operation, 4,700 men, 13 ships and 33 aircraft, suggested something larger. Byrd's personal notes described regions as green as the Amazon and mountain ranges that were not supposed to exist. In one entry, he referred to an entrance through the ice shelf large enough to admit our aircraft. When the fleet returned after only 2 months, the mission's abrupt end fueled decades of speculation. Byrd's later diary, published posthumously in the 1990 seconds, mentioned a land beyond the poles that was the center of the great unknown. Since then, the idea of gates beneath Antarctica's ice has persisted, not in myth, but in quiet reports and restricted data. The continent remains the most inaccessible on Earth, protected under the 1959 Antarctic Treaty, which prohibits military activity and restricts exploration to scientific purposes. Even now, satellite imagery of certain sectors, particularly around Queen Maud Land and Wilkes Land, appears to have been blurred or overlaid. These regions are where several anomalies have been recorded: sudden magnetic fluctuations, radar shadows, and infrared signatures resembling warm air vents in zones where the temperature never rises above -40 degrees Celsius. In 2001, a team from the British Antarctic Survey detected an underground lake more than 3 kilometers beneath the ice. It was named Lake Vostok. Later, scans revealed that the lake was sealed off from the surface for at least 15 million years. But the real surprise was the radar mapping that followed: structures resembling long corridors, right angles, and arches beneath the lake bed. Officially, they were categorized as natural ice folds. Yet several technicians reported that the patterns repeated at exact intervals, forming grids not found in nature. When the Russians drilled into Lake Vostok in 2012, the borehole was immediately sealed again. Reports said the team had withdrawn due to contamination concerns, though unconfirmed transmissions from the site mentioned pressure changes and unexpected organic readings. The sample cores were never released. Instead, the data were classified, and the base remained closed for several seasons. Scientists stationed at nearby outposts were instructed not to approach within a 20-kilometer radius. Other discoveries followed similar patterns of silence. In 2016, NASA's IceBridge mission recorded heat anomalies beneath the Ross Ice Shelf, localized zones of warmth large enough to support liquid water in solid ice. The readings suggested geothermal activity, yet no volcanic signatures were found. Some researchers speculated that these could be vents, perhaps connected to vast subterranean caverns. In 2018, satellite radar detected a massive void beneath the Thwaites Glacier, nearly 300 meters tall and the size of Manhattan. The cavity was described as growing, as if something below was consuming the ice from within. Accounts from the early polar explorers offer cryptic parallels. During the 1930 seconds, the British Graham Land expedition noted whistling winds emanating from ice tunnels that extended for miles inland. The sounds resembled mechanical vibrations more than air movement. In 1949, a Chilean Air Force pilot named Lieutenant Mario Sepulveda reported flying over an oval opening in the ice near the South Magnetic Pole. He saw fog rising from it and a faint greenish light within. His photographs vanished when turned over for development. Later, in 1960, the Argentine Antarctic Institute recorded tremors that seemed to come not from tectonic movement, but from rhythmic pulses deep beneath the plateau. Seismographs showed patterns repeating every 12 hours, consistent with some form of mechanical or cyclical process. The data were quietly archived. A memo written by Dr. Carlos Reyes, one of the lead geophysicists, described it simply as if the continent is breathing. Theories about these phenomena range from geothermal chambers to evidence of ancient installations buried by time. Some researchers point to legends shared among multiple cultures. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind. The Tibetan texts describe Agartha, the subterranean refuge of the enlightened. Norse sagas tell of Svartalfheim, the world of the dark dwellers who forged beneath mountains. These stories may have been memories' echoes of a lost geography when the poles were warm, and civilizations retreated underground as climates shifted. Modern ice-penetrating radar has revealed formations resembling tunnels beneath Antarctica's surface. In 2019, data released by the European Space Agency suggested linear voids stretching for hundreds of kilometers under the continent's crust. Their uniform width, approximately 300 meters, was inconsistent with known geological fractures. A scientist involved in the study remarked anonymously, "If these are natural, they follow rules nature rarely uses. At certain intervals, faint magnetic emissions have been detected from these regions. The signals pulse with mathematical precision. Amateur radio operators in the 1,990 seconds recorded sequences of short, evenly spaced bursts, each lasting 15 seconds, transmitted at a frequency inconsistent with known communication systems. The source appeared to be beneath the Antarctic Circle. The data were later labeled as atmospheric anomalies. Governments have shown quiet interest. The United States established a permanent research base at the South Pole in 1957, equipped with advanced radar and seismic instruments. While the base's official mission is climate study, many of its readings remain classified. In 2018, satellite images captured a column of steam rising from a fissure near Mount Erebus, followed by weeks of radio silence from nearby observation posts. When communication resumed, no mention of the event was made. In 2020, European scientists studying neutrino emissions from deep ice detected unexplained upward-traveling particles, cosmic rays, moving opposite to the expected direction. Dr. Derek Fox of Pennsylvania State University remarked, "It's as if something beneath the Earth is producing them." His statement was later retracted, but the measurements remain on record. Some geologists argue that these gates are not literal openings, but portals of data zones where the Earth's magnetic field interacts with the atmosphere, allowing glimpses into what lies beneath. Others believe they are remnants of ancient technology, sealed and dormant under kilometers of ice. Old Tibetan writings describe entrances that appear only when the breath of the world warms the white shell. Whatever the explanation, Antarctica continues to hold its silence. Its air routes remain heavily regulated, its satellite imaging controlled. The ice conceals more than cold, it hides time itself, layered in white walls that grow thicker with every century. Somewhere under that frozen expanse, perhaps near Lake Vostok or Queen Maud Land, may rest the gates to a forgotten empire closed, humming faintly, waiting for warmth. The Hollow Earth experiments. In 1692, the English astronomer Edmund Halley, known for the comet that bears his name, proposed a theory that would linger in scientific and philosophical circles for centuries. He suggested that Earth was not a solid sphere, but a series of concentric shells, each separated by vast hollow spaces. These inner layers, he believed, might even sustain life and possess their own light sources. His reasoning came from irregularities in compass readings, magnetic variations that, he argued, could only be explained by multiple magnetic poles rotating within the planet. In Halley's time, the idea was not dismissed as fantasy, but treated as a serious attempt to explain the unknown. Over the next 100 years, this model was refined, questioned, and quietly adopted by certain circles. The French naturalist Pierre Bouguer, while measuring gravity in the Andes in 1735, noted that the Earth seemed less dense than it should be. His data aligned, though unintentionally, with Halley's claim that empty chambers could exist within the crust. By the late 18th century, even Isaac Newton's followers debated whether gravity alone could account for the planet's internal structure. If the Earth was indeed hollow, as Halley proposed, the inner surface might host a separate world lit, inhabited, and sealed from ours. In 1818, an American Army officer named John Cleves Sims Jr. brought the theory into public life. he distributed circulars across the United States declaring that the Earth was hollow and habitable inside. He wrote, "I declare the Earth is hollow and habitable within, containing a number of solid concentric spheres, one within the other, and that it is open at the poles 12 or 16 degrees. Sims petitioned Congress for funding to mount an expedition to the North Pole to locate these openings. Though the proposal was denied, it drew national attention. Newspapers mocked him, yet his followers known as Simesians spread his vision of inner continents, temperate climates, and ancient civilizations beneath the Arctic ice. One of Sims's students, Jeremiah Reynolds, continued the cause. In 1829, he persuaded President Andrew Jackson to authorize a naval exploration toward the South Pole. Reynolds spoke before Congress, saying, "There are lands within the hollow of the world, and knowledge sleeps there." The expedition was delayed but eventually set sail in 1838 as the U.S. Exploring Expedition under Charles Wilkes. Officially, it charted Pacific Islands and portions of Antarctica. Yet in Reynolds's private notes, later recovered by the historian Richard Ellis, there is mention of unusual magnetic stillness near the 70th parallel and a glow upon the horizon without a sun. As exploration advanced through the 19th century, new instruments deepened the mystery. In 1869, German scientist Hermann Plassmann published The Living World Within, arguing that seismic waves traveling through the Earth slowed unexpectedly at certain depth, suggesting large voids or low-density regions. Though modern science would later attribute such readings to differences in mantle composition, Plassmann's data became fuel for early hollow Earth enthusiasts. His diagrams, showing a vast inner ocean and suspended central sun, were reproduced in occult journals from London to Vienna. The theory took on new life in 1871, when a self-published book appeared in Street Lewis titled Etidorpa Aphrodite, spelled backward. Its anonymous author, later identified as John Uri Lloyd, described a man's descent through Kentucky's limestone caves into a luminous subterranean world. Though presented as fiction, the work drew from real geological surveys of the Mammoth Cave system, which remains one of the largest known cave networks on Earth. The book's descriptions of air that glowed softly without flame, of smooth corridors carved by unknown tools, echo the same details later, reported in accounts from explorers who claim to have reached inner chambers beneath the pole. By the turn of the 20th century, the hollow Earth theory began merging with emerging science. In 1913, Norwegian engineer Olaf Jansen published The Smoky God, claiming that he and his father had sailed through an Arctic opening into a hidden world bathed in a dim internal sun. He described cities of marble, advanced technology, and beings more than 3 meters tall. The book was widely dismissed, yet its nautical details, the latitude, wind direction, and star positions matched real Arctic conditions. Jansen's account included one peculiar remark. The compass needle turned restless, as if searching for another world. The fascination reached military and scientific institutions during the early 20th century. German physicist Hans Herbiger's world ice theory proposed that ice and hollow space governed the cosmos. It inspired secret research projects in Europe during the 1,930 seconds and 1,940 seconds, seeking access points to a supposed inner realm. Declassified fragments from Allied archives reference expeditions toward both poles under various pretexts: meteorological, archaeological, or magnetic studies. Among them was a 1,938 German Antarctic expedition that mapped parts of Queen Maud Land and dropped metallic insignias marking the area as Neuschwabenland. Decades later, conspiracy theorists linked these missions to alleged underground facilities built within the ice, though no credible proof has surfaced. In the mid-20th century, the idea of a hollow Earth resurfaced through the lens of technology. American engineer Raymond Bernard published The Hollow Earth in 1964, claiming that both the North and South Poles were entrances to a vast inner domain accessible by air. Bernard referenced not folklore, but declassified radar anomalies and unverified testimonies from polar pilots who reported openings of unusual geometry. His arguments drew on data from seismic surveys and atmospheric pressure readings, suggesting that the poles behaved as thin points in the planet's crust. Even mainstream science occasionally brushed against these questions. In 1970, researchers drilling the Kola superdeep borehole in the Soviet Union found the crust to be thinner than expected and recorded unexplained sonic reverberations at extreme depths. While the official explanation cited rock fracturing, the recordings deep, resonant, almost rhythmic, were later described by engineers as mechanical in tone. Such sounds reignited public curiosity about what might lie beneath the layers of stone. Today, seismology provides detailed models of Earth's interior, showing a molten core rather than a hollow one. Yet certain anomalies persist, zones of unusually low density beneath the Pacific and Africa, vast enough to hold entire continents. Some geophysicists call these LLSVPs large low shear velocity provinces. Their structure remains poorly understood. Others, outside mainstream circles, suggest they could be remnants of older shells, hollow spaces long collapsed or filled. From Halley's first proposal to the experiments of the atomic age, humanity's curiosity has always turned inward as much as outward. The hollow Earth theories, though dismissed, left behind a quiet legacy of measurement, exploration, and secrecy. The magnetometers, the boreholes, the radar pulses all point to a deeper question that lingers. What exactly lies beneath our feet, beyond the crust and beneath the silence of stone? The machines that never stopped. In 1949, miners working near Norilsk, deep in Siberia, reported a persistent humming sound that seemed to rise from beneath the permafrost. The noise was low, steady, mechanical like distant turbines turning in a locked chamber. Soviet engineers investigated, believing it to be caused by industrial resonance. But when the drills were stopped, the sound continued. Seismographs in the region recorded faint rhythmic vibrations repeating every 11 seconds. No source was ever identified. The local newspaper, Krasnoyarsk Worker, published a single paragraph about it before the story vanished from archives. The phenomenon was not unique. In 1978, geologists at the Kola superdeep borehole in northwestern Russia heard similar tones. As the borehole reached depths beyond 12 kilometers, sensors detected patterns of vibration inconsistent with natural geological activity. The recordings, later analyzed at the Pulkovo Observatory, revealed modulation as if a pulse was being transmitted. Some researchers suggested they were picking up harmonics from Earth's rotation, but others noted that the frequency shifted slightly every few hours, following no planetary cycle. In internal memos, these anomalies were referred to simply as machine signatures. Similar reports emerged elsewhere. In 1982, during oil exploration in Alaska, geophones recorded rhythmic underground sounds that resembled the startup of engines. The operators assumed it was feedback from their own drilling rigs, yet the pattern persisted long after the machinery was shut down. An engineer named Dennis Klein described it as a metallic heartbeat that didn't stop. His report was filed, but never published. Across the globe, deep Earth microphones and magnetic sensors continue to pick up unexplained pulses. In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded a powerful underwater sound in the South Pacific. It was nicknamed the bloop. The source was traced to a point near the Antarctic Peninsula, coincidentally close to the sectors previously blurred in satellite maps. The noise was mechanical in nature, repeating at intervals as though rotating. Officials later attributed it to shifting ice, but the pattern was too regular. The frequency matched no known seismic or glacial event. In 2008, a research team in Patagonia discovered a network of underground cavities while mapping glacier melt. At night, their instruments recorded humming vibrations that traveled laterally through the rock instead of vertically. The team leader, Dr. Luis Mendez, wrote in his field notes that the pattern resembled distant generators. The data was sent to the University of Buenos Aires, where it was classified as non-reproducible atmospheric interference. No follow-up study was published. Modern magnetometers sometimes detect faint, alternating magnetic fields that appear and vanish with no correlation to human technology. In 2013, the European Space Agency's Swarm satellite mission registered pulsing magnetic signatures beneath the Antarctic crust, repeating every 12 hours the same pattern noted decades earlier by the Argentine seismologists. The readings were never explained. A NASA analyst privately commented that the data looked artificial but behaved natural. Long before the instruments, ancient records described similar phenomena. Sumerian tablets from Eridu mention the breath of Enki rising from the ground, a sound like copper wheels turning underwater. The Rig Veda refers to Anila, the hidden engine of the world, a divine mechanism that spins beneath the skin of the earth. Tibetan monks in the 12th century spoke of the Shankhavajra, a perpetual machine buried beneath Mount Kailash that sings when the world is out of balance. It is possible that these are poetic descriptions of seismic rumblings, yet the precision with which the ancients described mechanical rhythms, steady, timed, deliberate, feels different from the randomness of nature. When compared to modern vibration readings, the intervals match within margins of seconds. In 2015, an American research team drilling in the Ross Ice Shelf recorded electromagnetic pulses at exactly 783 Hz, the same frequency as the Earth's natural resonance known as the Schumann frequency. However, unlike the natural background hum, these pulses showed complex modulations, as though carrying encoded information. The recordings were analyzed at McMurdo Station, but later withdrawn. Only one internal email, leaked months later, contained a brief note. The system is still active. Theories vary. Some physicists suggest that deep geological layers could act as resonant chambers, amplifying electromagnetic feedback from the planet's core. Others propose that the signals are remnants of an ancient energy network machines buried long before human civilization, still drawing power from geothermal flows. A few believe these systems were constructed by the same pre-cataclysmic empire described in the myths of Agartha and Shambhala, designed to stabilize the Earth's magnetic field after a cosmic event. Declassified files from the 1960 seconds mention Operation Teledyne, a joint Soviet-American project that placed resonance sensors across the Pacific Rim. The goal, according to official statements, was to monitor seismic activity. Unofficially, both sides were testing the idea that the Earth's crust was transmitting controlled frequencies. A surviving diagram from 1967 shows transmission points aligned with known fault lines San Andreas, Tonga, and the Himalayas forming a global lattice. The records stop abruptly after 1971. Independent researchers, analyzing seismographic data from public archives, have found repeating intervals in global tremors. These microquakes, imperceptible to humans, appear synchronized tiny vibrations occurring at identical moments across multiple continents. The delay between them is consistent with a signal moving through the planet's core at mechanical speed rather than seismic velocity. When plotted over time, they form a faint but recurring rhythm, steady, methodical, ancient. Some have tried to listen more directly. In 2021, a group of acoustic engineers lowered a low-frequency microphone array into Iceland's Irinukagiga volcano, which descends nearly 400 feet into the Earth. The array picked up constant oscillations, low, mechanical tones, repeating with clock-like accuracy. The recording lasts 47 minutes. When converted into audible range, it sounds like engines turning in the dark, each cycle beginning with a rising hum and fading into silence. Official explanations remain cautious. The vibrations are classified as microseismic coupling events. Yet the repetition, the uniformity, and the persistence suggest design. Whether natural or artificial, the planet seems to hum a slow pulse from a deep hidden system that never stops. Geologists studying the core's electromagnetic properties admit that the field occasionally reverses, flipping polarity over millennia. During these transitions, the frequency of subterranean hums increases. Ancient myths from every culture describe such moments as ages of upheaval times when the world's heart beats faster. If the machines beneath the crust truly exist, their purpose remains unknown. Perhaps they are relics of a civilization that sought to regulate the planet's magnetic field. Perhaps they are part of the Earth itself, an ancient mechanism beyond human comprehension. Every reading, every hum, every pulse recorded from the deep seems to say the same thing. Something is still turning below us, unseen, unbroken, older than our species. The Kingdom of Light. In 1926, Nicholas Roerich, the Russian painter and explorer, traveled through the Himalayas on an expedition sponsored by the American Museum of Natural History. His journey took him across Tibet, Mongolia, and the Altai Mountains, following ancient trade routes that had long been tied to myth. During the expedition, Roerich's Tibetan guides spoke repeatedly of a place they called Shambhala, a hidden kingdom beneath the surface of the earth, radiating its own light. He wrote in his journal that the monks described this world as a land of eternal brightness, where the air trembles like gold and the soil glows beneath the feet. Roerich recorded the story with the calm of an ethnographer, but his words carried undertones of awe. They believe, he wrote, that its gates open only to those who walk without fear. The legend of a luminous world beneath the ground is far older than Roerich's time. In the Sanskrit texts of the Mahabharata, there are descriptions of Nagaloka, a subterranean realm where serpentine beings guard cities lit by radiant crystals. In those passages, light does not come from the sun, but from stones that breathe fire without smoke. The Nagas were said to preserve ancient knowledge, sealed away when humanity became corrupt. Similar motifs appear in early Christian mysticism. The 4th century monk Ephrem the Syrian wrote of a paradise beneath the roots of the mountains, where lamps never burn out and the rivers shine. The Tibetan Kalachakra teachings describe Shambhala not as a metaphor, but as a physical place hidden beneath layers of mountains and time. The texts state that its capital, Kalapa, is illuminated by a central radiance that needs no sun or flame. In the late 19th century, when the Russian mystic Helena Blavatsky published The Secret Doctrine, she combined these traditions with Western esotericism, describing an inner world of masters living in the halls of Agati. She claimed that emissaries from this realm occasionally emerged to guide human evolution, their knowledge encoded in symbols, scattered across civilizations' spirals, suns, and lotus forms, carved into the oldest stones. Reports of light in subterranean spaces persist in the modern age. In 1934, a mining team near Kimberley, South Africa, drilling for diamonds, broke into a vast chamber lined with crystal formations. According to the surviving log, the walls emitted a dim phosphorescence even after the lamps were turned off. The sample stones lost their glow when brought to the surface. Chemists later classified the effect as triboluminescence, though the miners insisted that the crystals had been pulsing before they were disturbed. In 1947, during Admiral Byrd's polar flight, his private log reportedly mentioned a horizon of soft inner light and verdant land beneath the ice. His official report made no reference to such observations, yet copies of the alleged diary circulated in esoteric circles decades later. Byrd described seeing structures that glowed from within and rays without source, as though the sky were reversed. Scholars treat these claims as myth, but the language matches older accounts from the Tibetan Shambhala Tantra, which speaks of light that rises from below and bends upward so that no shadow falls. Quote, accounts of artificial or perpetual light beneath the earth are not limited to Asia. In 1572, German chronicler Johannes Letzner wrote about an abandoned salt mine near Halberstadt, where workers found carvings of suns and concentric circles deep in the rock. They reported that the chambers were faintly illuminated, though no torches had been lit. When the air was disturbed, the glow dimmed, as though the walls themselves breathed. A similar report appeared in 1,876 inches, the Edinburgh Review, describing caves in Peru with phosphorescent stones that seemed to awaken only in silence. For centuries, travellers in Central Asia have told of meeting wanderers in white garments who speak of an underground sanctuary called Agartha, a kingdom governed by a king of light. In 1913, Polish explorer Ferdynand Ossendowski claimed in his book Beasts, Men and Gods that he heard these legends from Mongolian lamas while crossing the Gobi Desert. They said that the ruler of Agartha knows all the affairs of the world through devices which mirror the movements of men and nations. The lamas described glowing spheres suspended in the air, transmitting knowledge from the surface to the inner world. Ossendowski dismissed it as superstition, yet years later, when the Soviet Academy of Sciences examined his notes, they found that his recorded coordinates overlapped regions of anomalous magnetic readings. Modern scientists occasionally encounter unexplained luminescence in deep environments. In 2009, speleologists exploring the Movile cave in Romania discovered a sealed ecosystem that had been isolated from the surface for millions of years. The air was toxic, yet the walls emitted a faint green light due to a chemical process still not fully understood. Biologists called it a product of chemosynthetic biofilm, but some researchers observed rhythmic flickering, as if responding to motion. In 2016, a team of Russian geologists investigating boreholes near Yakutia recorded light within sealed crystal layers. The phenomenon persisted for several minutes after the borehole cooled. Their unpublished report described it as ionized air reacting under mechanical pressure. But the senior geophysicist Dr. Viktor Orakov wrote privately that the glow felt alive, like eyes opening in the dark. Ancient cultures consistently link these luminous domains to wisdom, longevity, and silence. The Hopi people of North America speak of their ancestors emerging from an underworld called Sipapu, described as a place of light, not darkness. They say that when the surface world grows corrupt, humanity will return to the luminous inner realm. Similarly, early Norse texts refer to Gimle, a radiant refuge beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, untouched by time or death. Whether symbolic or real, the notion of a kingdom of light has always existed alongside human doubt. Each age translates it differently: gods beneath the mountains, radiant machines, glowing caverns, or magnetic anomalies. Yet all describe the same image: a world not buried but waiting, illuminated without flame, older than memory, and perfectly still. The records of the inner library. In 1889, a monk named Tashi Dorje wrote in his journal about an underground chamber beneath the monastery of Tashalhumpo in Tibet. He described corridors carved into the bedrock, leading to vaults filled with tablets of black stone covered in faint, glowing inscriptions. The texts, he claimed, were written in a language no one could read, but were said to have been deposited there before the last sun turned cold. Dorjet's notes were translated decades later by a British Orientalist named Henry Smeaton, who remarked that the account reads more like an inventory than a legend. Monks called the chamber the Inner Library, a repository that held the history of humanity's forgotten ages, records not written on paper, but etched into the earth itself. Similar stories exist far beyond Tibet. In 1929, Peruvian archaeologist Julio Tello investigated the caves beneath the Andes near the site of Cusco. Local Quechua guides spoke of Paititi, a hidden city of gold lying under the mountains, where metallic tablets recorded the knowledge of the First World. Deep in one of the caverns, Tello found walls covered with geometric patterns and strange metallic plates. He described them in his journal as engraved with constellations unknown to our present sky. The artifacts were reportedly sent to Lima for study, but disappeared after political unrest the following year. In 1965, Argentine priest Carlos Crespi presented a collection of similar plates at his church in Cuenca, Ecuador. The engravings depicted men with helmets, winged beings, and diagrams resembling machines. Crespi claimed they were given to him by local tribes, who said they came from tunnels beneath the jungle. Photographs of the collection survive, showing symbols that resemble both Sumerian cuneiform and early Sanskrit. When the church burned in 1968, much of the collection was lost. The surviving fragments, thin sheets of gold and copper, were catalogued by the Ecuadorian government, but later sealed from public access. Explorers who followed Crespi's story found references to the same tunnels. In the 1970 seconds, Hungarian researcher Juan Moric obtained permission from the Ecuadorian authorities to explore the so-called Cueva de los Tallos, or Cave of the Oilbirds. Inside, he claimed to have discovered an artificial tunnel system with smooth walls, straight passages, and chambers large enough to house entire buildings. Moric spoke of metallic books stacked on stone pedestals, each containing intricate patterns of raised lines. He refused to disclose the location of these chambers, saying they were not meant to be opened. Years later, astronaut Neil Armstrong joined a British Ecuadorian expedition to the same site. The team found natural caves but no artifacts. Still, their instruments recorded magnetic irregularities that have never been explained. Legends of underground archives extend across cultures. In Egypt, beneath the Sphinx, the Hall of Records is said to hold the knowledge of a lost civilization predating dynastic times. In the 1930 seconds, the American psychic Edgar Cayce claimed that the hall would one day be found, containing records of Atlantis and maps of ancient continents. In 1997, seismic surveys beneath the Sphinx Plateau did reveal rectangular anomalies, voids, arranged symmetrically under the right pore. Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities acknowledged the cavities, but halted further excavation, stating that they were of no archaeological interest. Quote, "Ancient texts describe similar libraries guarded by those who never sleep. The Book of Enoch, an apocryphal Hebrew scripture, speaks of stone tablets buried beneath the mountain of the east that hold the secrets of the watchers. In Mesopotamia, inscriptions from the city of Ur mention a house of deep knowledge sealed during the reign of King Enmenluana around 30,000 BCE by Sumerian chronology. The tablets were said to have been stored in a chamber of fireless light. Archaeologists have found none, yet the description matches that of luminous caverns reported in Tibet and South America. Modern discoveries occasionally echo these ancient claims. In 2003, researchers scanning beneath the Giza Plateau identified a network of tunnels leading to previously unknown chambers. One of them, a limestone vault 60 feet below the surface, contained traces of mica, a mineral used in ancient times for electrical insulation. Mica has also been found lining walls in the temples of Teotihuacan in Mexico, suggesting a shared purpose across civilizations separated by oceans. Some geologists believe the mineral was used to store heat or electricity, implying that these chambers once held devices rather than scrolls. In 2019, satellite ground-penetrating radar revealed rectilinear structures beneath the Taklamakan Desert in western China. The formations were aligned with magnetic north and buried under layers of compacted sand. Local legend calls this area Lop Ne, the Sea of Death. Chinese records from the Han Dynasty mention a city swallowed by dunes after lights beneath the ground burned without flame. Excavations were never authorized, and the region remains a restricted military zone. Historians have noted that almost every ancient culture speaks of knowledge stored in stone. The Mayan Popol Vuh describes writings hidden in the darkness, safe from fire and flood. The Vedic Agni Purana mentions books that cannot burn. In these accounts, preservation was not achieved through secrecy, but through transformation writing, transmuted into substance, text into structure. The library became not a collection of objects, but an extension of the earth. In recent years, scientists studying the acoustic properties of deep caves have found that sound behaves unusually in certain chambers. At particular frequencies, tones echo indefinitely, as if the stone itself retains memory. Physicists call this phonon trapping. Yet to the mystics of old, this was the method by which knowledge was stored, the spoken word preserved in vibration, waiting to be awakened. From the Tibetan vaults to the Andean tunnels, from the Sphinx's hidden chambers to the deserts of Asia, the pattern remains. Somewhere beneath us, according to legend and fragment, lies the memory of civilizations erased by time. These records, whether carved in stone, embedded in minerals, or suspended in sound, form an unbroken library, silent, sealed, and luminous. The Lost Engineers. In 1891, during the excavation of a coal seam near Moberly, Missouri, miners unearthed what seemed to be a paved floor 30 meters below the surface. Beneath it lay a series of walls made of smooth stone blocks, perfectly fitted, without mortar. Local newspapers reported the find briefly before the mine was sealed due to flooding. The workers swore they had seen metal tools embedded in the stone, delicate, curved, and engraved with patterns that resembled circuitry more than ornament. No samples were preserved, but the story became one of many strange records describing the work of unknown builders deep within the earth. In myth, these builders have many names. The Hindus call them Naga's serpent beings who dwell beneath the ground, masters of metallurgy and sacred geometry. In Celtic tradition, they appear as the Tuatha De Danann, a radiant race said to have retreated into the hollow hills after their defeat by men. The Greeks told of Telchines, the forgers who crafted the trident of Poseidon and the sickle of Cronus, later cursed and banished beneath the waves. In all versions, they vanish not through destruction but by withdrawal, descending into the earth, taking their knowledge with them. In Tibet, legends of the Agarthans describe a similar lineage, the engineers of the first Sunday. They were said to build with sound, shaping matter through vibration. The French writer Saint-Yves d'Alvedre, who published Mission de l'Inde in 1886, claimed to have received telepathic communication from their descendants. He wrote that the hidden masters of Agartha govern the subterranean forces of the world, maintaining balance through vast machines powered by the music of the spheres. His words were dismissed as mysticism, yet his descriptions of electromagnetic harmonics match modern theories of resonance-based construction. Archaeological anomalies lend quiet echoes to these stories. In 1938, Chinese archaeologist Chi Pu-Tei discovered a series of stone discs in the Bayan Karaula Mountains. Each disc was engraved with microscopic grooves spiraling toward the center, resembling phonograph records. Analysis showed that the stone contained cobalt and other conductive metals. Though initially thought to be ritual artifacts, later tests indicated traces of magnetization, suggesting that they once rotated within an electromagnetic field. The discs became known as the Dropa stones, their origins officially unconfirmed. Throughout the 20th century, engineers studying ancient sites noticed recurring precision that exceeded available technology. In Egypt's Giza Plateau, granite blocks weighing 70 tons are cut with accuracy measurable to fractions of a millimeter. In Peru's Sacsayhuaman fortress, polygonal stones interlock so tightly that even a razor blade cannot pass between them. In India's Ellora caves, entire temples were carved downward from single cliffs, following mathematical symmetry that modern architects struggle to replicate. The civilizations credited with these works left no record of how such feats were achieved. Some researchers quietly suggest they were built upon far older foundations, the remnants of a forgotten order of engineers whose techniques were later imitated but never equaled. Reports from deep excavations occasionally uncover tools or artifacts that do not belong to their geological layer. In 1912, miners in Oklahoma extracted an iron cup embedded in solid coal dated at over 300 million years. In 1852, a metallic vessel of silver and zinc was blasted out of rock in Dorchester, Massachusetts, at similar depths. The objects were studied, reported, then quietly set aside. The Smithsonian briefly catalogued them as anomalous industrial relics before removing them from public display. In the 1,960 seconds, Soviet scientists conducting magnetic resonance studies beneath the Ural Mountains discovered patterns of alloy traces extending through the bedrock. The shapes suggested a vast lattice thin veins of metal arranged in hexagonal geometry. When samples were extracted, they were found to contain rare isotopes of titanium and vanadium, fused in a way modern metallurgy could not replicate at the time. The researchers referred to it privately as the grid. Its origin was left unexplained. Legends claim these engineers built more than structures, they built systems. In Sumerian records, the god Enki was said to create machines that breathe and remember, called Me, devices of order and law. In Greek accounts, Hephaestus forged automatons of gold to serve the gods. In India's Vimana texts, flying craft were described with engines powered by mercury and vibration. Scholars interpret these as metaphors, yet the mechanical language in ancient scripture feels deliberate specifications written in mythic form. When modern researchers study the subterranean acoustic anomalies of the Himalayas, they find frequencies near 432 Hz, considered by mystics to be the harmonic key of the universe. The same frequency is recorded in the resonant chambers of ancient temples, from Giza to Angkor Wat. Geophysicists measuring these sites report that sound waves linger unnaturally long, amplifying until the air itself begins to shimmer. Ancient builders may have known how to control resonance not for art, but as energy, a silent power source beneath the earth. Declassified Soviet files mention Project Oral 7, initiated in 1952, to study non-natural resonance phenomena beneath Central Asia. The research focused on mountain regions where compasses failed and radio signals distorted. A 1,956 report concluded, "There are mechanisms in operation within the crust that show signs of regulation." It was never published. Similar American studies during the Cold War, such as Project Mohole, attempted to drill into the mantle, but all were abruptly halted before completion. The official reason: rising costs. A recurring theme in the old records is retreat. The Agarthan engineers, the Nagas, the Tuatha, all are said to have left when the surface world became unstable. Some texts describe cataclysms, solar storms, floods, or wars between gods that drove them downward. Others speak of preservation, that they built beneath to guard the memory of an earlier cycle of humanity. If the subterranean machines still function, they may be the last remnants of that cycle, automated caretakers of a world long gone. In 2017, deep-sea sonar in the Southern Ocean detected symmetrical ridges extending outward from Antarctica's continental shelf. The pattern resembled the radial design of a gear. Each ridge was precisely equidistant, each arc measurable to mathematical perfection. The data was archived as glacial anomaly, but to those who study the old myths, it looked like the trace of something built a fragment of the work of the lost engineers, resting under kilometers of ice. Across continents and centuries, from temple to tunnel, the same fingerprints appear: precision, silence, light without flame, stone that hums. Whoever the builders were, they did not vanish completely. Their architecture endures in the bones of the planet, mute but alive, as if waiting for the signal to begin again. The cataclysm that drove them below. Around 12,000 years ago, something changed. Ice melted, oceans rose, and entire species vanished. The Younger Dryas period, a brief return to glacial cold, after the last ice age ended abruptly, marked by geological layers of soot, carbon, and nanodiamonds found from North America to Greenland, from Turkey to Siberia. These microscopic crystals form only under extreme heat and pressure, the kind produced by cosmic impact or massive solar radiation. In 2007, a team led by geophysicist Richard Firestone proposed that fragments of a disintegrating comet struck the Earth near the Laurentide ice sheet, unleashing firestorms that scorched the northern hemisphere. The event triggered a collapse in climate stability and the extinction of mammoths, mastodons, and many early human settlements. Yet ancient myths describe not only destruction, but retreat and exodus into the earth itself. The Sumerians called it the deluge. The Babylonians preserved it as atrahasis. The Greeks spoke of Deucalion's flood. In every account, the gods warn a chosen few to descend, not ascend, to hide in the deep halls where fire cannot reach. The Epic of Gilgamesh mentions the Abzu, the underground realm of the god Enki, where the waters are pure and the foundations are bright. In the Andes, Quechua myths tell of the Pachamama's womb, where the first ancestors sheltered until the sun returned. The Hopi of North America remember a time when the world above burned and their ancestors fled through sipapu holes in the earth, opened by benevolent spirits. When they re-emerged, the surface was silent. Geological evidence aligns eerily with these tales. In South Africa, layers of fused quartz show signs of intense heat dating to around 10,800 BCE. At Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, the earliest known megalithic site constructed around 9,600 BCE appears to have been intentionally buried, its reliefs depicting comets, flames, and scorpions. Astronomers from the University of Edinburgh have suggested that the carvings commemorate a celestial impact visible from Anatolia. The builders may have encased their temples to preserve them from the chaos above. In 1936, French archaeologist Henri Breuil studied Paleolithic cave paintings in the Pyrenees and noted a curious pattern. Many figures, usually animals, were drawn facing downward or entering openings. They move into the earth, he wrote, as if seeking safety. Breuil proposed that these caves were not merely shelters, but ceremonial gateways, recalling a memory of descent. Radiocarbon dating later confirmed that these images were made around the same time the Younger Dryas ended, the dawn of agriculture, the rebirth of surface civilization, and perhaps the closing of the gates below. Legends from the East preserve the same moment in different words. Hindu cosmology describes cyclical destructions called pralayas. In the Matsya Purana, the god Vishnu warns of a flood caused by the sun itself. When the seven rays devour the worlds, the wise will hide within the womb of the earth. Tibetan texts call this the age of the burning sky, when a burst of solar energy forced the enlightened to retreat into the inner realms of Agartha. The descriptions of these refuges are consistent: cities of stone that glowed without flame, powered by the eternal fire of the world's heart. In 1994, researchers at the University of Illinois discovered that solar activity had spiked catastrophically around 10,000 BCE, leaving clear traces of beryllium-10 isotopes in polar ice cores. The radiation would have scorched surface ecosystems and weakened atmospheric shielding. Survivors, if any existed, would have sought refuge underground caves, tunnels, or purpose-built chambers. The sudden appearance of advanced, organized cultures immediately after this period, agriculture in Mesopotamia, megaliths in Turkey, and city plans in the Indus, has led some to suggest that remnants of an older, hidden civilization emerged again when the surface stabilized. The flood myths speak of gods returning from the deep after the waters receded. The Sumerian king lists record reigns stretching back 241,000 years, ending with the words, "Then the flood swept over." The first kings after the flood are said to have come from the sea and to have possessed the secrets of metal, writing, and architecture. In Egypt, the god Thoth appears after the flood to rebuild temples according to divine geometry. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl emerges from the underworld, teaching calendar and law. The pattern repeats catastrophe followed by sudden advancement, as if knowledge had been preserved elsewhere, waiting to surface again. In the 1970 seconds, oceanographers mapping the Caribbean seafloor discovered symmetrical ridges off the coast of Cuba, arranged in grid-like patterns at depths exceeding 700 meters. Sonar images showed what appeared to be rectangular structures buried in sediment. Marine geologist Pauline Zalitsky described them as too regular to be volcanic. Dating suggests submergence around 10,000 BCE, the same era as the global flood narratives. The structures remain inaccessible, lying under layers of silt and secrecy. Some theorists believe that the ancient engineers, faced with planetary devastation, activated vast subterranean systems to preserve both themselves and their archives. The mythic machines that never stopped may have been environmental stabilizers, devices channeling geothermal or magnetic energy to regulate the planet's balance after the impact. The rhythmic vibrations detected by modern seismographs could be remnants of that ancient mechanism, still functioning autonomously beneath the crust. In 2018, satellite magnetometry over Antarctica recorded concentric magnetic anomalies radiating from a point beneath the ice sheet near the South Pole. The pattern matched no known geological feature, but corresponded with the orbital alignment of the Earth's magnetic poles. If the builders did retreat below after the cataclysm, they may have constructed their refuge at the very axis of the world, hidden under ice, sustained by warmth from the planet's core. Across traditions, the message is consistent. Humanity was not destroyed, but relocated. The surface became a temporary wasteland, the interior a sanctuary. Those who descended became myths, the Agarthans, the Nagas, the shining ones beneath the mountains. When they finally emerged, they rebuilt the world, leaving behind structures that defy explanation. The cataclysm was not an end. It was a passage, a migration from light into darkness, from noise into silence. The earth sealed their gates with stone and time, but the memory lingers, etched in myth, in ice, and in the quiet hum beneath our feet. The Last Descent. In 1960, the US Navy launched Project Mohole, a scientific attempt to drill through the Earth's crust into the mantle. Officially, it was a geological mission to study the planet's composition. But within internal memoranda, later declassified in part, the stated objective was broader, to reach the transition zone. The project began off the coast of Mexico's Guadalupe Island, where the crust was thinner. For years, engineers worked aboard floating platforms, lowering drills through more than 5 kilometers of ocean and rock. Then, without warning, funding was cut. The final borehole stopped at a depth of only 3,600 meters. The last entry in the project's internal log read, "Pressure readings inconsistent with expected density. Temperature drop recorded at final depth. instrument failure followed by unknown vibration. Official reports dismissed the anomaly as a mechanical glitch. Yet some of the project's engineers described what they felt through the drill cables, a hollow rhythmic pull, like machinery far below. The hole was sealed. The files were locked under Department of Defense classification until 1993, when a partial release omitted all seismic recordings. 2 decades later, in 1989, the Soviet Union began its own deep drilling program at the Kola Peninsula. Known as the Kola Superdeep Borehole, it reached over 12 kilometers before the drill ceased unexpectedly. Sensors registered a sudden drop in density and a faint, continuous resonance. The recordings, obtained by Norwegian engineers assisting the project, captured frequencies in the subsonic range, too low for human ears, too regular for nature. Soviet technicians jokingly called it the breathing of the Earth. In later interviews, one geophysicist said it was as if the planet was not inert, but alive. After the fall of the USSR, portions of the project's archives were sold privately. Among the documents was a sealed folder marked Projekt Mir 11. Inside were seismic maps, showing corridors of low-density matter extending beneath the Barents Sea, aligned toward the magnetic pole. A handwritten note on one sheet read, "Possible passage. Directional echo indicates cavity." No follow-up expedition was ever recorded. In 2002, a multinational team under the European Space Agency began radar mapping of the Antarctic continent. While surveying an area near the Woldat Mountains, instruments detected geometric voids beneath 4 kilometers of ice rectangular, with sharp corners and uniform dimensions. The readings were transmitted to the research ship Polarstern. Then the feed stopped. The data was labeled corrupted, and the team's field logs were sealed under European Commission privacy regulations. One technician, speaking anonymously years later, said, "The signal ended like a door closing." Around the same period, satellite telemetry from the Swarm mission revealed pulsing magnetic signatures from beneath the Transantarctic mountains, repeating every 12 hours. These were the same intervals recorded decades earlier in seismic data from Argentina and Russia. When journalists asked for clarification, NASA issued a brief statement citing natural fluctuations in the crust. The explanation did not mention the precise rhythm of the pulses, steady, timed, deliberate. The last known private expedition to Antarctica occurred in 2017. Funded by an independent consortium calling itself the Helios Foundation, the group included engineers, biologists, and former military personnel. Their declared aim was to study subglacial geothermal anomalies. Satellite communication with the team ceased after 6 days. The rescue mission that followed found their base camp intact, instruments still operating, food uneaten. The snow around the camp showed a single line of footprints leading away into the white. The tracks ended abruptly, as if erased by heat rather than wind. Fragments of encrypted transmissions recovered from the expedition's equipment contained only static and a short phrase repeated in code: "Depth achieved, entry confirmed." No further communication was received. The pursuit of the inner world did not end with explorers or scientists. Governments, too, turned their attention downward. In 2019, an unannounced seismic drilling operation began under the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency (DARPA), focusing on deep subsurface resonance mapping. The program, publicly justified as energy research, was discontinued in 2021 without explanation. Environmental monitors in the Nevada desert recorded unusual magnetic interference during those months, pulsing at intervals identical to the Antarctic anomalies. Occasionally, whispers surface in academic corridors. A geophysicist from Kyoto University claimed that during a magnetotelluric survey beneath the Pacific, sensors picked up a structured signal encoded within the Earth's natural electromagnetic noise. The data resembled communication, patterned and compressible, as if transmitting in a language of frequency. His research was rejected from publication. In private correspondence, he wrote, "It's not coming from space, it's coming from below." Older records suggest that such transmissions are not new. In 1954, radio operators on a US Navy vessel near the South Atlantic detected low-frequency bursts, repeating at intervals of 13 seconds. The transmissions were recorded on magnetic tape labeled unknown terrestrial origin. When replayed at higher speed, the sounds formed harmonic tones, structured like coded sequences. Decades later, digital analysis showed that the tones followed Fibonacci ratios, the same mathematical sequence seen in natural growth and ancient architecture. Legends echo through these findings with eerie precision. The Tibetan texts of the Kalachakra Tantra describe gates beneath the earth that open when the song of the world is heard again. The Norse Völuspá speaks of a final sound rising from below the Gjallarhorn, heralding the return of the hidden gods. In each case, a vibration, a tone, a call from the deep. If the ancient engineers truly survived the cataclysm, perhaps their descendants still inhabit the Earth's interior, maintaining systems that hum in silence, their purpose long forgotten by those above. The repeated pulses, the subglacial voids, the geometric patterns, each may be evidence of continued operation, not abandonment. Today, official science dismisses the idea of an inner civilization. Yet the data persists, signals beneath the noise, rhythm beneath the random, faint but steady. Somewhere, deep below the crust, the last descent may never have ended. Perhaps the explorers who vanished did not fall victim to disaster, but found what they were seeking and chose to stay. The Whispering Archives. In 2015, researchers at the University of Iceland installed a network of deep seismic microphones across dormant volcanic chambers near Askja. The project's goal was to map subterranean airflow and thermal exchange. But in midwinter, when the geothermal vents were silent, the instruments began to pick up faint bursts of sound that repeated every 18 hours. They were not seismic tremors, nor wind resonance. When the frequencies were converted into the audible range, the pattern resembled speech, structured, rhythmic, almost syllabic. The data was stored, encrypted, and transferred to a private laboratory for analysis. No paper was ever published. The last line in the project's log simply read, "The archives have begun to speak." Quote, similar reports emerged from other regions. In 2009, an Italian research group surveying deep karst systems in the Apennines recorded harmonic tones echoing from empty tunnels. The echoes were not reflections, but initiation sounds generated from within the rock itself. When cross-referenced with global seismographic databases, the same frequencies appeared in Siberia, Chile, and beneath the Pacific. The tones were too consistent to be coincidence. Some researchers speculated that these vibrations originated from mineral resonance, triggered by magnetic flux. Others whispered that they were messages from an intelligence still buried beneath the crust. Ancient texts describe something eerily similar. In Mesopotamian myth, Enki's temple in Eridu was said to contain the stones that sing of memory. Egyptian priests of Memphis spoke of Heka, the speech of the stone, used to awaken the knowledge of the gods. Tibetan chronicles of Shambhala mention the whispering vaults, chambers where voices of the past could be heard when the air was still. These legends may have described the same phenomenon now measured by modern instruments, a faint, coherent vibration emanating from the depths, cycling endlessly through stone. In 1974, British engineer Michael Farley was studying ultrasonic reflections from old mines in Cornwall when he detected persistent patterns beneath the geological noise. The signals pulsed in groups of 7, followed by silence, then repeated. When slowed to human tempo, the sequence resembled coded intervals, like dots and dashes stretched over hours. Farley later remarked, "It was as if the Earth itself was recording and replaying." His findings were dismissed as equipment feedback, but the raw tapes digitized decades later show frequencies nearly identical to those detected in Iceland. The resonance seems to favor specific materials: granite, quartz, and basalt. These are piezoelectric rocks capable of converting mechanical stress into electrical charge. When placed under immense pressure, as in the lower crust, they can act as natural memory devices. Modern geophysicists have demonstrated that such minerals can store vibration patterns for centuries, even millennia. If the lost engineers knew this, they could have imprinted knowledge directly into the Earth, an archive without books, writing, or flame. In 2020, a Chilean research vessel studying subduction zones near the Nazca Plate reported rhythmic electromagnetic surges synchronized with the planet's rotation. The pattern matched those from Iceland and Italy. The team described it as a voice beneath the ocean floor. When cross-analyzed with gravitational data from the GRACE satellite, faint density anomalies appeared below 900 kilometers, aligned with the path of the signal. These anomalies formed perfect arcs, too symmetrical for chance, too deliberate for geology. Somewhere beneath the crust, the planet carries a library written not in symbols, but in vibration. The old myths called it the living archive, a place where memory hums rather than sleeps. If true, the machines that never stopped may not be simple engines of power, but devices of preservation systems that store the language, history, and instructions of the world that came before. The hum continues, inaudible but measurable, threading through mountains, ocean floors, and the frozen continent. It speaks in rhythm, not in words. Perhaps one day, when instruments reach deep enough, the full message will surface. Or perhaps it has been speaking all along, in the magnetic pulse beneath our feet, repeating what the ancients already knew, that the Earth remembers everything, the silent pulse. In 2022, a network of seismic sensors spanning 5 continents recorded a faint tremor that rippled through the planet at precisely 4:17 UTC. It was not an earthquake. The oscillation circled the globe 3 times in 20 minutes, then vanished. Its origin point could not be located. The readings were identical across instruments in Chile, Japan, South Africa, and Norway, identical down to the microsecond. Geophysicists called it a non-seismic event. The data was stored, studied, and quietly forgotten. These pulses have happened before. In 1998, 2004, 2012, and again in 2018, nearly identical global vibrations were recorded, each separated by roughly 6 years. The waves are long, slow, and harmonic. Not destructive, but steady, like a signal repeating through the planet itself. At first, researchers thought they were caused by deep mantle convection or atmospheric coupling. But when plotted over time, the intervals form a perfect progression, each pulse arriving slightly earlier than the last, as though counting down to something unseen. Magnetic readings also change in their wake. After each global tremor, satellite magnetometers detect subtle shifts in the Earth's field and minute rotation, a fraction of a degree. These changes are too small to affect compasses, but they occur consistently, synchronized with the pulses. The European Space Agency's swarm satellites have logged over 24 such micro-rotations since 2010, forming a slow spiral toward the South Atlantic anomaly, the weakest point in the planet's magnetic shield. When geophysicist Dr. Carla Hansen presented her findings at a 2021 conference in Zurich, her slides were abruptly cut from the public record. The official summary omitted her conclusion. The field is responding to something rhythmic. It's not random noise, it's organized. Across the world, instruments in deep caves and polar stations report similar low-frequency hums. The Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of Earth, has grown slightly louder each year. Normally stable at 7.83 Hz, it now fluctuates between 8 and 9, sometimes rising to 10. The difference is small but measurable, as if the planet's pulse were quickening. Environmental factors cannot explain it. Lightning activity, which sustains the resonance, has remained constant. Something beneath the crust appears to be feeding energy back into the field. In 2019, technicians at an Antarctic listening post reported a continuous vibration that lasted for 36 hours. The frequency oscillated between 15 and 16 Hz, the same pattern once recorded at the Kola borehole. When amplified, the signal revealed faint modulations interference bands, too regular for random interference. The data was sent to McMurdo Station. The analysis returned one short notation: signal consistent with previous events. Source unknown. Legends often describe sound as the first force of creation. In the Rig Veda, the universe begins with a tone aum, whose vibration sets matter into motion. The Greeks called it the music of the spheres. For the Egyptians, it was the breath of Thoth, the sound that ordered chaos. Ancient builders carved resonance chambers into their temples, as if to tune themselves to that same frequency. Perhaps the hum of the planet is not new at all, but a continuation, a residual harmony from the machinery of its making. Some scientists now admit, carefully, that the Earth behaves more like a living system than an inert rock. The lithosphere moves, the magnetic field pulses, and deep within, the core spins independently from the mantle, its rotation accelerating and slowing on a 70-year cycle. Yet the rhythm of the recent pulses does not match that natural motion. It suggests coordination, as though responding to a command. Satellite gravimetry shows that beneath Antarctica's Queen Maud Land, mass is shifting, not rising, but redistributing. Something below the ice appears to be expanding slowly, pushing outward. The pressure readings coincide with the pulse intervals. Instruments detect heat, too not volcanic, but uniform, diffused, and spreading radially. A slow, artificial warmth. At Lake Vostok, sensors lowered by Russian scientists in 2020 recorded strange pressure variations near the lakebed. The data shows vertical displacement, as if an object beneath the sediment were moving upward by millimeters each month. Officially, the readings are attributed to subglacial rebound. Unofficially, several technicians who analyzed the results have said the pattern looked deliberate. "It's not geological," one remarked, "it's breathing." In ancient myth, the awakening of the inner world always begins with sound. Tibetan lamas teach that when Shambhala rises, it will be announced by a ringing beneath the mountains. The Hopi prophecies speak of the earth's heart beating faster. The Norse poems foretell Gjallarhorn's call from beneath Yggdrasil, the signal that the hidden realms open once more. Each describes the same event in different tongues. A pulse felt across the world, growing stronger, drawing near. Those who study the phenomenon today prefer quieter terms: resonance bursts, mantle harmonics, deep field oscillations. Yet behind the scientific language lies an older fear, that the planet is preparing to awaken a system long dormant. If the lost engineers built mechanisms to stabilize the Earth after the cataclysm, perhaps those machines are reactivating. Each pulse might be a calibration, each magnetic shift a correction, preparing for an event humanity no longer remembers. The last pulse, recorded in late 2022, carried a secondary echo, weaker but distinct, arriving precisely 30 seconds after the first. It came from the opposite side of the planet, as if answering. The symmetry was perfect call and response, depth to depth. Seismographs labelled it Event D12. No further explanation was offered. Beneath our cities, our oceans, and the weight of continents, something continues to move slowly, rhythmically, in perfect silence. The machines that never stopped still hum below, maintaining their ancient pulse. Whether they guard, repair, or wait, no one knows. But every 6 years, the earth trembles again, faintly yet unmistakably, as if remembering. The signals continue. Every few years, the planet trembles with the same quiet rhythm, steady, deliberate, almost alive. Perhaps it is the Earth's own heartbeat, or perhaps it is the faint echo of a civilization that moved below long before history began. The stories of Shambhala, Agartha, and the luminous halls beneath the ice remain dismissed as legend, yet the data, the hum, the warmth, the symmetry persist. Somewhere in the dark, the machines that never stopped still turn. If you followed this descent through myth, geology, and silence, thank you for joining us. Subscribe for more journeys into the hidden past, where legend and science overlap in the quiet hours of the night. Let your mind wander as we keep listening for the pulse beneath the world until it speaks again.